Hello, this is the part 1 of chapter 2. I'm going to break this lecture into 2 different parts. As usual, we're going to go through all the content from the book. The book will provide an excellent resource. I would also urge you to look at Google JavaDoc, which is the explanation of the different Java classes, as well as go through the demos. This is starting out slower, but it will definitely get harder and faster as we go through this course. In this particular lecture, we're going to cover fields, constructors, methods, parameters, assignment statements. The way I lecture is I like to introduce concepts in advance of future lectures. So some terms I will use will actually go into more detail later, but my goal is to review and repeat as often as possible so that you learn as much as possible sooner than later. Ticket machines, exploring the behavior of a typical ticket machine. Naive Ticket Machine is a project that you can have from Pearson. You should be able to download it from the site. If you have any issues, as always, please let me know. Things to think about is how is money entered in the machine, how does the machine keep track of the money entered, etc. At this point, if you want to pause this video and go on to the Naive Ticket Machine demo, that's fine, but right now I'm going to move forward. Ticket machine is an internal view. Interacting with objects gives us clues about behavior, etc. All Java classes have similar looking internal view. There's nothing magical here. What we're doing is just going through source code. Alright, so basic class. Remember before when we talked about classes. Classes are like the definition. There's something called the class diagram that we'll talk about. There's other stuff that we'll talk about. But basically, the definition or the wrapper is at the top, class ticket machine. The inner part we're not really worried about at this point. Once you go down to the lower example, the inner contents, which it shows above as being omitted, but down below, are fields, constructors, and methods. Fields hold values, constructors help set up the class for use, and methods are the meat of it, if you will, or the code. Words with special meaning in the language, in other words, what are typically called reserved words, are public, class, private, int. There's many more of these. If you go through the book, you'll see a list of them. If you Google it, you'll see a list of them. Java has dozens of words that you cannot use in your normal programming. That's all a reserved word. Java typically does everything in lowercase except for the name of the class, and if you have like variables or methods with multiple words, the second word is typically capitalized onward. Alright, so fields store values for objects. Okay, fields, also called variables, are denoted here. So I have 3 fields, price, balance, and total. They all use what's known as a primitive called int, which is an integer number. Later we're going to learn about a class called integer. Please be careful to not mix those up. This is a primitive. That's really important to remember. It will get you later if you don't. And then private is a visibility modifier, and it basically says who can see it. In this case, private means that only code within this class is able to see these variables. Okay? So instance variable, type, and visibility modifier. Let's see, what else on here? Some change rarely or not at all. Some values change. In other words, I can change this as often as I want or as little as I want. It's up to you as a developer. We're going to learn about something called the constant later, which is it's set once and it never changes, and that's what they're referring to. Constructor. If we're inside of Ticket Machine, we're inside a Ticket Machine, and you have what's called a method of the same name as the class, exactly the same name, then when it gets created, this will automatically get executed. In this case, they're saying when Ticket Machine gets created with a single int value, it will automatically do this with the building of the constructor when it creates it as an object. Remember, class is the code, object is what exists in memory, and then when you have multiple objects of the same thing, those are all instances. They're the same name as their class we talked about, close association with the fields. One of the things that they're not highlighting here, a constructor, you can have multiple constructors within a class as you define different variables that get passed in or different signatures. Passing data via parameters. This is actually running something from within BlueJ. Name of the instance is going to be called this. This is what it will be called in memory. So I'm executing the code in a class that creates an object, and in this case, there's only one instance. I'm passing the value 500, so it shows that 500 goes into the constructor and then gets stored into the value. This is seemingly simple, but doing it is a little bit harder. Take the time, write some basic code, and work with it. If you did the Hello World example that I put up there, then you will have an example of this already. Assignment. Values are stored into fields and other variables via assignment statements. So in other words, if you have a variable over here equals something, doesn't matter what it is. I could put a number here if it's an int. I could put characters here if it's a string. There's a variety of other values. So in this case, the example is balance equals balance plus amount. So in other words, it's going to take the current value of balance, whatever that happens to be, and add in the amount to it. So then it would be balance plus amount gets stored into balance. A variable can store just one value, so any previous value is lost. In other words, once this goes in here, the existing value of balance is erased, and the new value of balance goes into it. It's much like an Excel spreadsheet if you use those, where a cell can only have one value. You can put a formula in there, and every time you update the values that the formula relies on, it updates the value of that cell. Where it's different is in Excel, you can't equal into the same cell. Here you can. Hopefully I didn't confuse you with that example, but again, current value of balance plus the current value of amount goes into balance the placeholder. Choosing variable names. There's a lot of freedom over the choice, price, amount, name, etc. Don't use non-descriptive values or cryptic values. This confuses people. It ends up causing confusion later. There's a tendency to want to do it because you, the developer, want to just write something quick. The only thing that they're really not talking about is in Java style. If I had dollar amount, the D would be small and the A would be capital. So it would be DOLLAR, capital A, MOUNT. That's typically what you do with multiple word variables, but there's an exception which we'll talk about later on. Next concepts we covered are methods, string concatenation, conditional statements, and local variables. With that, I'm going to pause this video to keep these in more digestible chunks. I'll see you in the next video. Hopefully you got something from this lecture.